Welcome to the Meetings Podcast, the meeting organizer's podcast source for what's new in the meetings and events industry. Meetings Podcast is a conversation with a variety of voices that looks at events, meetings, and media. Meetings Podcast is sponsored by Imex America, America's worldwide exhibition for incentive travel, meetings, and events.
Hey, welcome back, listeners. This is Mike McAllen of Grass Shack Events and Media, a corporate meetings production company. I wanted to thank our sponsors, Audible, audible.com. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/meetings podcast. They have 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. I use it all the time, so check it out. You get a free book. Might as well get your free book. Go to audibletrial.com/meetings podcast. Thank you. I want to thank Imex America. They are also our sponsor, our gold platinum sponsor, I guess. And let's get right into the interview. And this is with Brandt Krueger. Sorry, I said Grant, but his name is Brandt Krueger. And Brandt is going to kind of talk a little bit about himself and what he's doing these days. And I love Brandt. He's been on the show a few times. He has an excellent podcast called GatherGeeks, and that's with Biz Bash. So check that out too. And I will talk to you at the end of the interview. So enjoy. Welcome back to the Meetings Podcast. This is Mike McAllen from Grass Shack Events and Media and AV for Planners. And on today's show, we have Brandt Krueger. Hi, Brandt.
Hello.
Nice to talk to you again. You've been on the show several times, haven't you? I know just recently you were on it with Sean, but
I wouldn't say several times. I don't know. Maybe it was 1,000,000 times, or maybe it was just 1,000. But it's somewhere in between 1,000,000 and 1,000.
Perfect. Well, that's what we want to hear. And so if people don't know about you, today's podcast, we're really going to get to know Brandt, the ins and outs of Brandt.
That's truly frightening.
So let me read a short bio. As a first-generation personal computer user since late 1970s, technology is part of Brandt's DNA. Combine that with a degree in technical theater and a core in psychology. Add almost 20 years experience in the meetings and events industry, and you get a powerful event technology cocktail. Brandt has spoken at numerous industry events and seminars all over the world, been published in many industry magazines and websites, and teaches public and private classes on event technology for the Event Leadership Institute. He is also owner of the Event Technology Consulting. He's also the owner of Event Technology Consulting and an appropriately named meeting and event technology consulting company. Brandt, that is you.
that is supposedly me, yeah.
Yes, and you have a podcast called GatherGeeks with Biz Bash.
Yeah.
Very cool. I like listening to that podcast very much. I encourage everyone who listens to this podcast to listen to that podcast. And also, you just got back from a nice trip, didn't you? You were in Europe, weren't you?
I was at IBTM World in Barcelona.
Wow, cool. How was that?
It was very cool. I mean, you know how it is on these trips. It always sounds a lot more glamorous than it is.
Right. I
spent a great deal of time, in my hotel room and at the convention center and on a bus in between the two of them. But I always figure that when my wife and I retire, we'll actually get to go back to these places and do all the touristy things. But yeah, it was a really great show. It's interesting to see kind of the differences between like an Imex and IBTM. As they kind of came from the original same kernel of the idea of the hosted buyer program, and so to see similar but different events fairly back to back was really a pretty interesting experience.
What was the difference? Was there?
It's a lot of little subtle things. I mean, it's and none of which I can say for sure is coming from the top down or anything like that. It felt like a lot more off the floor business is done at Imex, kind of the lobby, meetings and things like that. But maybe it's just because, mainly of the venue there, at the Sands, where they've got that nice lobby area that people can kind of go down and have, quiet meetings at. This was much more of a convention center, typical like big giant open floor convention convention center. So it seemed like there was less of that kind of off the floor business going on there. But then again, there were also some nice cafes and things like that were attached to the center. So just little things, the differences in how the education is handled. It seemed like IBTM had more like focused, 4 or 5 main areas of rotating sessions, whereas, Imex has partnered with, so many of the different associations to have, a lot more sessions going on, and then Smart Monday put on by MPI. So, rather than having, 50 or 100 different sessions, they had, just kind of 4 rooms kind of rotating through. So it just subtle differences. I had a lot more kind of international conversations being in Europe than I do at Imex in the US. Not better, not worse, just different.
Very cool. Yeah, I love Barcelona. I've been there on vacation.
What I saw of it was beautiful, yeah. And I did get out to have some tapas and wine a couple of nights. So
did they have the evening event kind of things like at Imex?
They did, but in very European Barcelona style. It didn't start till 10 o'clock at night. I was still a little jet lagged and going to be speaking the next day, so I opted out of the late night club experience. But I heard it was very good, and again went till like 3-4 in the morning, much like the event at Imex.
How funny! So let's start off. Why don't you give me your favorite quote?
Yeah, I've got a couple of them right now. One of them you're going to have to bleep in order to maintain your clean rating on iTunes. But I love it because, especially as we ramp up towards the political season, and that is: the amount of energy necessary to refute bullshit is an order of magnitude larger than it is to produce it. And that applies to
fantastic.
That applies to so many things in life. It's so easy to just spew it out, and it takes so much more effort to actually refute it and prove it wrong, and then it never really actually proves it wrong. So that's one that's been on my mind a lot lately as we start to ramp up towards the elections here in the U.S. And then the other one that keeps coming up over and over again, because you always get asked these questions, right? What's your favorite quote? Or what do you think about work-life balance? And this was some of the best advice I've ever been given in my life, which is there is no such thing as work-life balance. There's only life. And I've really found that to be true, that if you get obsessed with trying to have a work-life balance and it's some kind of set of scales where you're adding to this pile and taking away from that pile, it can really mess you up more than just looking at it as there's only life and there's priorities. So at this moment in time, maybe my work is my priority. Or at this moment in time, maybe my family is my priority. And if you tend to look at it more in that way, it's a much less stressful way of looking at it. Just at the moment, I need to focus on work. And as soon as I get a chance, then I'll come back and focus on the family. And sometimes there's family stuff that needs to take priority over work. There's always music concerts and all this kind of things. As I'm bringing up a couple of kids now, there's things that sometimes that's absolutely my top priority is something that I'm doing with them, and then there's other times that absolutely my top priority is something I'm doing for work. So I think it's just a nicer way of thinking about it, that there's only priorities, and you just need to look at your big list and say, what's the priority right now? Deep.
It's great. It's a great thought. I mean, as you are now often on your own working in the world, it becomes more and more important just for me to have people that are working for me to have their own, actually have things that they're focused on, just like you're saying. And I just read this book, Traction, and it's all about rocks for people. So they have 3-month goals and things, but it's also put it in life things. And it's interesting exactly that, to put in the priorities. So great quotes. Great quotes, Brandt. Great job. Great job. We just sign off now.
Thanks, everybody. It's been great. Hope you have a wonderful...
So what's the path that led you to us? I know in your bio we kind of talked a little bit about it, but how did you get into what made you get interested in this industry?
Well, I started out in theater, like a lot of people actually in the event industry. It's kind of funny how it's a nexus, for people that came from theater, people that came from the hospitality industry, people that came from television. It's this kind of weird nexus, this industry that we're in. So I came up through the theater track. I graduated college with a degree in technical theater, so sound and lights and building sets and all that kind of stuff. And straight out of college, what do you do with that? And so I actually got a job at a theatrical rental lighting house. So they rented lights and gear to all kinds of theaters all over the Midwest, as well as just here in Minneapolis. And it was contact that I made. So when I was quote unquote asked to put in my resignation for that company, I only grabbed a couple of names out of the Rolodex. And one of those names was a guy that did sound and lights for corporate events, like real small time, ex rock and roller, the long, gray long hair, one of those guys. And so I started doing freelance tech with him, and he did mainly corporate events, and I made connections there with the company that the production company that I wound up getting hired by. And then I worked for that production company for 18 years. So it went very quickly from fresh out of college to, I guess I'm in the events industry.
Yeah. What was the biggest challenge you've encountered in doing all this?
I mean, it's
I guess the better question for this is, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's my show and I'll interrupt you if I want to. But how about the jump from the production company to what you're doing now? What's been the biggest challenge? Because I've been watching you very closely, because I always do. And it's very cool to see you succeeding. And so what has been the biggest challenge you've encountered? Because you have a family, you've left a good company that you're working for, and you're out on your own. So go.
Well, yeah. I mean, honestly, some of the biggest challenges. There's a money challenge. I mean, I'm not going to lie about that. The new business is going very well, but it was a pretty big throttle down. I had a nice, good paying job after working there for 18 years, basically going from that to, all right, honey, we're going to live on your income plus whatever I can pull together out of my magic new company that I'm putting together. And it's gone very well. For a brand new company, but there was definitely a step down in cost or in wages, what I was making. And the good news is that I am extremely lucky that I have gotten to know some fantastic people in the industry. I am not the first person to have done this, right? I'm not the first person to have left a job and go independent and start their own company. And so I've been very fortunate that I've had the advice of people that have, been down this road before, and they very encouraging, very positive. Hey man, you can do it. Yeah, it's going to stink for a while, but you're gonna pull out of it, and all kinds of really fantastic advice and really fantastic encouragement. So the challenges then are just, just getting the business, getting out there, getting recognized, getting the name out there. It's self-marketing to a certain extent, which in a weird sort of way, I kind of was already doing without knowing it, by being out there on Twitter, by speaking at conferences. And, that was part of the decision of going out on my own. I left on, good terms with from the production company that I was working at. There could not have drawn up a more, fork in the road kind of scenario for me, where the path that they were laying out for me meant I was going to be in the office more, doing less live events, which I love. Coming from a theater background, I love the live part of what we do, and it was going to mean doing less of that. It was going to mean having to give up some of the speaking and the teaching and the education stuff, and at the same time, my personal network of people that I knew was at like an all-time high. The people that I knew in the industry, all these fantastic people again, like yourself, I mean, just people that I've gotten to know over the years, was at an all-time high. There was never going to be a better time to go out on my own. It was a lot of, late night talks with my wife about it. And it boiled down to, if I went 5 years down the road with the company I was at and wasn't happy, there was no going back to that day. Then the network would have, gotten dwindled and fizzled and gotten smaller and smaller. There was just literally going to never be a better time to do it.
Very cool. So what was the pinnacle of this now? How long have you been on your own now?
It's about a year and a half.
Yeah.
About that.
So has there been a moment yet that you've kind of gone, aha, this is the right decision? Can you think of that moment when that was, or?
Not specifically, but interestingly enough, in talking about it again, my wife has said, you seem happier. And I didn't think I was unhappy. So, it's one of those weird things of like, I wasn't unhappy, but she says I seem happier. so I
would know.
I take that to heart, and I trust her opinion on the matter.
That's great. That's really great. So let's tell me a little bit about like what you do. Let's say somebody wants to work with you. They just heard your voice. They're like, I need to work with this guy. What is the process like? How would they work with you? I know you do several different things, but take us through the process from like talking to someone into working with them.
So I set it up as a consultancy. So like you said in the bio, the name of the company is Event Technology Consulting. I thought I'd be weird and actually name it for what it does, as opposed to like cyber tech
or like my company, Grashak Events and Media, which we came up
I
with years ago. Which is like,
I didn't want to say anything. But yeah, so I figured that would be a nice umbrella, to cover all of the things that I really wanted to do. So on the one side, on the consulting, I try and work with planners to help them, help guide them towards the right technology. So event technology, AV, it's all exploding. You've got people in the business, 30 years, and their heads are exploding with all of this event technology. So just working with planners to help guide them towards the right technology, whether that's mobile apps or AV or projection mapping, whatever that is, and really starting with the goals of the event and then backing our way into the technology rather than just what's hot, what's new, what's flashy, what's on the front page. So a subcategory of that then is I'm discovering that there is a certain percentage of the population that are wanting people to just, can I just pay you to take care of it for me? Can I, you can teach me everything you want to know about, projection mapping and AV and all that kind of stuff. But you know what? I just need someone that can I pay you to take care of it for me? So it's, getting bids and just managing things on site. Not a true technical director, but what I think, what I'm leaning towards calling it is more of a technical producer. And I've seen some people using that term for a lot of different things. So that's kind of one aspect of it. Now, very early on, I discovered that this translation, being able to speak geek and being able to speak planner, this translation works in both directions. So I also started doing consulting for software and hardware companies that were wanting to pitch to planners. Because I can't tell you the number of times, and I'm sure you've seen this yourself, where you're looking at somebody's marketing materials and you're 2 paragraphs in, you're like, I have no idea what this does. Sometimes these people have great ideas that, could really be useful in our industry, but just aren't having a good time of articulating what it is and why it's going to make planners' lives easier. And then kind of the third leg of the stool is just the education side. I wanted to really keep my hands in doing education classes and sessions. So I'm still doing the classes for Event Leadership Institute. And then I'm trying to speak at as many conferences as possible just to help planners get to know AV better, and understand the technology better so that they're not confused, they're not scared, they're not flipping to the back page of their AV bill, signing off on it, going, God, I hope it's got what I need. So that's kind of the three main legs of the stool that holds my company up at this point.
Very cool. Very cool. And so where do you see the future of where you're going?
Honestly, those are the things that I want to be doing. I do have, I'm keeping my hand in freelance. I enjoy doing freelance tech on the side because I don't ever want to get into a position where those that can't do teach. And I think it keeps you fresh, and it keeps you, your hands in the dirt and knowing what's, being used as far as the technology today. So I'm trying to, continue to do as many freelance gigs as I can on the side. That also kind of works well with this kind of technical producer role that seems to be emerging.
Very cool. Okay, so what's a typical day for you like? Do you have any kind of morning rituals, food, exercise?
Yeah, I sleep till about 11. I sit on the couch, eat bonbons all day.
Do you find you work a lot more now than you did when you had a job?
Yeah, a fair amount.
Yeah.
It's amazing how quick the day blows by, and working from home, trying to eliminate distractions and that kind of thing. But I mean, to answer your question honestly, I'm getting into kind of a fun routine that works really well for me. That would never work in an office. Honestly, the first hour of my day, I walk on the treadmill and catch up on industry news.
Nice.
So I've kind of built a tabletop to my treadmill. Plop the computer up there, and that's where I catch up on, what's hot in the industry. If I've run out of articles to read, I'll be listening to podcasts. And I really enjoy it, and I miss that when I'm on the road or, I get busy, working on a project or something like that, and I have to dive into work right away. I'm discovering that that's not only a healthy part of my routine, but something that I actually really enjoy, just spending that hour to kind of warm up to the day. And catch up on industry stuff. And
do you have a special food or stuff that you eat now that you're home? I mean, because I think the ritual thing is really, for me, it has been amazingly great because I've started meditating in the morning for a year now and going to the gym. Except now my shoulder's broken, I can't do anything. I'm just getting fat. But I trying to eat oatmeal in the morning and doing my things. But do you have like any kind of foods and stuff you eat now? Do you have a regular diet for that?
I tend to just shift onto something and then I'll lock onto that for like a year. And then at some point I'll just stop. So yeah, right now I've been kind of doing like meats and cheeses in the morning. Oh, wow. Just like little turkey meat sticks and cheese sticks. And I find that I don't eat nearly as much. Like,
and you have kids, so I hear the sticks. I think, that's
exactly,
where those are coming from. Exactly.
And I just started doing it one day. And then the next thing I knew, it was 3 months later and I'd, had that for breakfast like every day. So, it was I just find that I don't need as much, I don't need that big giant bowl of cereal or toast or pancakes or all that kind of stuff. It's nice to have every now and then, but like a meat stick and a cheese stick kind of covers me through about midday when I can have another little snack.
What are the web stuff that you look at in the morning? Are there some particular ones you always head to?
So what I do is I have Google Alerts set up for anything that mentions meeting technology or event technology. So in addition to the usual suspects like, Julius Solaris on Event Manager blog, Michelle Bruno, which is Event Tech Brief, I then have these alerts set up. And, sometimes it's garbage, but sometimes you get some really good articles out of there too. And that's also where I've discovered there's this whole new range of content scrapers. Have you run into this? Of people it's these little websites that are just scraping other people's websites.
Yeah,
like that happens to Julius's stuff all the time.
Oh, it must constantly happen to him.
Yeah, and so that pops up unfortunately a lot in those alerts. But it's like, how are you guys even making money off of that? I mean, it must be advertising clicks, but how does anybody make money off advertising clicks?
Well, they must do like just thousands of them, right? And then
I guess
because the numbers are, if you can make those pretty easily, they're all automated. It's terrible. Spammy crap. Huh. So, what'd you want to be as a kid?
I mean, It's just almost retroactive. Like, I don't think I actually did want to be, but now I wish that I had, like, astronaut, you know, like I don't think I actually did want to be an astronaut, but now I want to be an astronaut, like retroactively as a kid. And like, I would love to go into space. Like, so.
Very cool. It's funny, as you're talking, I was thinking, I just interviewed Will Curran the other day.
Yeah.
You know, Will, can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I kicked out my microphone right then.
I can't.
From my computer. Okay, good. But I see so much similarities between you and him. It's funny. A lot of good energy. And sorry, I don't know why I said that, but it's interesting. Because you were saying what you wanted to be a kid. And when I was talking to him, I was thinking, he could be my kid. He's so young. But there's a lot of similarities between you two guys. What book do you gift others?
Ooh, I usually buy books for my dad, and they're usually either historical or political. So I know you've had Audible as a sponsor from time to time. I listen to a fair amount of Audible books, and I try to do one like fiction and then one nonfiction. And I've hit upon some really good nonfiction books, like history of the United States type stuff. And so I'll frequently listen to those, and then, you know, come Christmas time, I'll buy one, you know, for my dad.
Very cool. And so is there any ones in particular you can think of?
I'm trying to remember the name of it. There was one called The Righteous Mind, which was a pretty in-depth and fairly impartial analysis of kind of conservative thinking versus liberal thinking. They tried to strip out as much of the politics as possible for being such a politically charged topic, and really looked at why people make the decisions that they make and how different personality types will have different triggers for, you know, what makes sense to them and what they're going to go with. So that was a really fascinating book. And then another history book would be Empire of Liberty, which it's about the period between the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. And that was fascinating from the more things change, the more they stay the same, because they were just as vicious in Congress then as they are now. I mean, just the same kind of petty fights and, you know, stuff that we think, you know, has only come about recently was going literally fights. I mean, they were literally fights on the floor of the Congress.
Oh, really?
You know, of you know, people getting into fist fights and things like that. And it was a really fascinating look at, you know, kind of we tend to think this is the way things have always been, and that it was, you know, divine governments building our government the way that it was built, and actually, you know, nobody really knew how it was going to turn out. You know, it was a grand experiment, and, you know, nobody was sure that it was going to turn out, you know, as well as it has, much less that it was some kind of, you know, perfect, you know, version of government.
And what kind of podcasts do you listen to? I know you're a big podcast listener because you've said that, but what are your favorite ones?
I listen to a lot of the podcasts on the TWiT network, TWiT, which stands for This Week in Tech. So they've got a couple of weekly podcasts called This Week in Tech and the New Screensavers. And then they've got more kind of platform-specific podcasts. So there's a Mac and iOS podcast. There's a Windows-only podcast, an Android-only podcast. So I listen to kind of those three specific podcasts, and then kind of the general technology seeps in from the side. I listen to this thing called The Meetings something or other. Some guy out in California. I don't know, it's kind of lame. So I actually listen to all the industry podcasts that I can find. So I do listen to Meetings podcast. I listen to Event Tech podcast with John Federico, and there's some new ones coming out. I haven't heard it yet, but Dana Frecker-Duty's podcast, GatherGeeks, I've heard is pretty good. So I try to balance kind of the industry stuff that's specific to our industry with technology in general, because the technology in general gives me a glimpse to what's coming down the pipe. So as you know, it takes a while kind of to filter down to our industry. They've been talking about beacons for 4 or 5 years now, and it's only now getting to the point where we're starting to really start to use them in our industry. So that's kind of my pipeline. Is I look to the regular tech to see what's coming down the line, and then try and extrapolate out, when it's going to start to hit our industry.
Very cool. Have you ever had a nickname?
Not a lot. My parents chose Brandt intentionally as being like a one-syllable name that would be unlikely to be nicknamed. But nonetheless, a lot of people call me BK, and a lot of people just call me Krueger. So,
how fun. Okay. What's the bravest thing you've ever done, Brandt?
Probably quitting my job and starting my own company. That was probably up there. Yeah, I wish I could say it was saving a busload of nuns and orphans, but as far as like sheer family impact and things like that, so far it's either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever done.
How fun. It's funny, I have a lot of questions in front. Like, I have tons of questions, and I like to kind of throw them out there now, and I have some base ones that I always ask, and then I got you on here, and I'm thinking, I should ask him questions that I would never ask anyone else, because you're my friend. But I want you to listen to this question, and you don't have to answer it.
Okay.
Tell me your most embarrassing story, and I promise not to judge.
I have a lot of them, and I usually I'm usually not. I don't have a problem with sharing them, but one of the funniest ones. Again, you would lose your iTunes clean rating because it is so not safe for work in the least bit, and involves lots of bad language and other things. So I will have to tell you that one another time. I'm trying to think of. It's actually one of the ones that's classically told as like the Brandt story. So I'll have to tell you that one another time.
Well, you're leaving everyone hanging now.
Yeah, I know. I hate to do that, but I really can't throw that one out there publicly. But I'm happy to tell anybody in person anytime.
Okay, so that's a good thing. If you see Brandt anywhere at any conferences or anything, you have to ask him, especially in the question and answer period of any of his sessions, I think.
Well, I think it usually has to be over a drink of some kind, and it's one of those like shaggy dog stories that goes on for a very long time. So that's another reason. I don't think we have time to go into that story. You know what? I mean, there's all kinds of embarrassing things that have happened over the years, working in production as I know you have, there's just all of these things where like you see, there was one time when somebody was chattering on the comm and I said, something to the effect of like, okay, I really need everybody to stop talking on the comm because it's really important for me to call the queues because I'm the one calling the queues and and while I'm doing this, I missed a queue.
Ugh.
So like while I'm going off about how important it is that I'm Mr. Q caller guy, I then like immediately missed a queue just because I'm an idiot. I mean, it was like I just spaced it. So everybody's got those kinds of stories.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So if you could time travel, where would you go and why?
Most people want to go in the past and like, fix something that they've done, change something. Yeah. I've got plenty of regrets along the way, but I think I'd go into the future and really just see where all of this is leading, for better or for worse. And then I could go into space because then, by then it will be, it'll only cost like $100 and you just space. So I get to have my astronaut and eat it too. No, that doesn't work. I can't say that. It doesn't work.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Honestly, I think it goes back to that work-life balance one. I think that's some of the best advice I've ever received. Is just not getting hung up on that work-life balance and just realizing that it's just a series of priorities. And I do a lot with, and I think you've mentioned this in the past, kind of the getting things done techniques of making lists and all that kind of stuff. Maybe I made that up, but
that's lists.
Yeah, that's been very helpful for me, kind of getting organized with lists, as few lists as possible, but as specific a lists as possible. So I have a list of things that need to be done for home, a list of things that need to be done for work, kind of a take a look at later list. Keeping things in balance that way by just, whatever needs to be the priority at that moment.
Very cool. Okay. What's working for you right now? What's a new thing that's working for you really well? New app, vitamin. You talked about your exercise in the mornings. A hack, kind of a time saver. Is there something you would like to share that someone might glean some knowledge from you?
Yeah, despite it not working very well the last time I was presenting at CIC Conclave, it's worked well since then. But I've been using a combination of my own personal Wi-Fi router to have my iPad control my Mac when I'm presenting. So the Wi-Fi router isn't connected to the internet. It's just, plug it in the back of the room. And then I use my iPad to run my keynote presentation. And if I were, if somebody were to ask me, what's the best way to present from my iPad, like, hey, I want to present from my iPad, that's the way I would push people into doing it. So you've got a backup. You could still use a clicker to advance or, go back on your slides. But if you do want to use the iPad, you can use that to see your notes. You can draw over on top of your presentation. So that's something that's been working very well for me, despite that one incident about 2 months ago. So,
very cool. What is your favorite industry event?
I'm a big fan of Imex. I know they've been a sponsor of the podcast, so I'm not just saying that. But I do really like that show, and I like it more every year. But it's mainly for the people. It's the people that go there. Every year, almost everybody I know in the industry is there. And then every year I meet more people in the industry. And then the next time I go there, almost everybody I know is there. Yeah. So it's really a great show for that. So I'm a big fan of that. Coming back from IBTM World, again, very similar conference with subtle differences here and there. They each do things a little bit better in different ways. So I'm a fan of that. And then I really enjoyed Collins and Collaborate this year. That was a new one for me that I hadn't been to before as well. And another kind of hosted buyer, private company show that everybody that I saw there really enjoyed. There was a lot of good education sessions, great keynote speakers, so much more of a traditional conference as opposed to a trade show, though there were trade show opportunities because of the hosted buyer thing. So that was – and the thing that was interesting about that one is they did a reverse trade show. So the hosted buyers got to just sit in one place, and the vendors were the ones that had to move around.
Oh, how funny.
So that people really liked because, as on these larger shows like Imex and IBTM, there's a toll that gets put on those hosted buyers. They earn their trips because they're seeing 10, 15 people a day, on opposite sides of a giant trade show floor. So they're hoofing it to get to those appointments. And so people really liked that. And the other interesting thing that they did is those were only like 2-minute sessions. So they would do kind of a reverse trade show speed dating. It was really a pretty ingenious way of doing it. And then they had plenty of open space time so that if you met a vendor that you wanted to have more time with, you could just meet them during the open space time.
That's such a great idea.
Yeah, you would have 2 minutes. And usually you can tell within 2 minutes, is this something I'm interested in and want to spend some more time with? Or, you know what, I'm not at all interested in this.
Right. Then you're not trapped there for the whole
day. For the next 15 minutes or however long your session is. So then they left plenty of open space, receptions and dinners and things like that where you could then, seek those people out and spend a little bit more time with them. So a really innovative way of looking at the hosted buyer program.
And so what is the coolest new trend that you're seeing out there?
I feel like we're on a bit of a slow march. There's nothing like incredibly hot right now. I've been hard pressed. Everybody's writing their end of the year, hot trends for 2016. These 5 things will change the way you look at event tech. Everybody's kind of writing those right now. And I felt this exact same way last year of none of those things I think are going to be incredibly important next year. I just feel like we're on this slow march right now. Maybe we'll see some, new things with beacons and RFID technology. Maybe we'll see some new things with, wearables, but I don't think any of that's going to hit saturation. I think we're just on this kind of slow plodding march. And my hope, though, is that something's going to come out of nowhere. Some new app or something that's just going to kind of take things by storm and, I never thought of it. Kind of like crowd mics coming onto the scene almost a couple years ago now, where like the second it came out, it was like, wow, nobody's ever thought of that. That's a fantastic idea. I'm hoping we'll see some of those.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if you woke up tomorrow morning and you could choose any other profession, and you had the option to start over from scratch, what would you do?
So besides radio DJ or astronaut?
Yes. I guess you could pick one of those if you wanted.
So, because astronaut, I'm just saying astronaut. Honestly, it's hard to look back with any kind of regrets in the path that I've gone. It's that there's been such a to B to C to D progression of my life so far that it's hard to say, man, I really wish I could go back. And other than astronaut and radio DJ, it's hard to, think of anything, off the top of my head that I would really rather be doing. And it's, I think that's a testament to the industry that we're in and the people that are in it. And you haven't asked this question, but I'll go ahead and answer it. I mean, my biggest regret in my professional life is that I didn't get involved sooner. That basically I was in my own little bubble for 15 years where it was just me and the people I worked with. And it wasn't until I got onto Twitter and started getting out there that I met so many great people in the industry, and started to get out and see the rest of the world that does what we do. And so I wish I could go back and do that sooner, So I guess if I wouldn't go back and do something, I wouldn't go do something different. I would go back and just hopefully have that awakening earlier in my professional career, because it's been such a fantastic experience for me, getting to know all of these people in our industry and getting those different perspectives and getting to travel and go all over the world and see how people do what we do that's the same and what's different.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, but with the coming of all the social media, Twitter and Facebook and all these things, I mean, you didn't have that before, and that was the kind of the cool. I mean, when you came upon it, so did I, and I met all these people too. I did the same thing, and I feel this exactly the same way because I worked a lot of years just with my same little pod of people traveling around doing shows, but that it opened up the door to meet, you and I became friends through it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really interesting. We actually came upon a good time. Actually, if we were younger now, then we would start out already in that, but you didn't have that opportunity in the past as much. I mean, you could go to all these association things and stuff and go to all the meetings, but the opening up of the social media really opened the doors to network.
Exactly. And I think the only equivalent would have been to go into the associations, possibly gotten involved with them earlier, and get to know people. But yeah, it's still not the same level of connectivity that's available now.
Yeah. And did you ever go to I never went to, before I started my own company, I never went to a association thing. I mean, it just wasn't kind of an option to go.
Yeah, I didn't.
It was more of a salesperson thing to do, like, they joined something, but we never did.
I didn't, and it wasn't a big priority in the company I was working for either. It was one of those I think someone over in the transportation department might be a member of something. I mean, it was one of those things where it wasn't a huge priority. And so it wasn't even really offered to me as an option, being kind of tech guy, working in the shop and working on technology stuff. I don't think that connection would have ever been made of he's the one that should be representing us in ISIS. I mean, it just wouldn't, it just, the connection wouldn't have ever been made.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I feel the same thing. It was just kind of the salesperson would go maybe. And then they always talked about, they're going to just want free stuff from us all the time.
Right.
And that was anyway. All right, Brandt, thank you so much. How can people get a hold of you?
Well, I'm available at BrandtKrueger.com. I'm at Brandt Krueger on Twitter. It's one of the advantages of having kind of a unique name is I'm able to pretty much get those nicknames locked in as soon as a new service comes out. So yeah, at Brandt Krueger on Twitter, BrandtKrueger.com, Brandt at BrandtKrueger.com. You can send me an email. Happy to chat. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Brandt, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Bye. Okay, well, thank you for listening to the podcast. That was fun talking to Brandt. Brandt always brings some good stuff to a conversation. Again, I wanted to thank Imex America and Audible.com for being our sponsors and keeping the show going. audibletrial.com/meetings podcast. You can get a free audiobook and 30-day free trial at Audible, and I use it all the time. So give it a try. And if you could do me a favor and head over to iTunes and give the Meetings Podcast a review, that would be really great. It helps people find us, and that would be fantastic. If you have any comments or questions, please email me at meetingspodcast@gmail.com. You can also find me at mike@grassshackroad.com, all spelled out, 3 S's in the middle, and I'd love to hear from you. And that's it. Have a great day, great evening, whatever time of the day it is right now that you're listening to this, and I will see you next time. I really appreciate you. Thank you for listening.
We appreciate and thank you for listening to the Meetings Podcast. Please email with any questions or comments to meetingspodcast@gmail.com. Meetings Podcast is sponsored by Imex America, America's worldwide exhibition for incentive travel, meetings, and events. The Meetings Podcast theme music is brought to you by the Delgado Brothers, which can be found at delgadobrothers.com.